Hold on one sec here. It's still true. Oh, good afternoon. This is David Perlman and
Heather Cox.
And we are here at MS Office Hours. Today is the 9th of July, and today with us we have our dynamic duo from University of North Texas, Steve Arnez, and I'll probably say your name wrong. I'm sorry, Arens, and Jason Gutierrez, and they're going to be kind of talking about how they came up with a pretty exciting solution in terms of how they're dealing with mental health visits and a number of other things. So I'll turn it over to you, and you have the floor for the next 25 minutes or so, and we'll leave a couple of minutes for Q&A. If you do not want to be recorded, please do not say anything.
And actually, I just want to add, this is brand new, at least on the view I'm seeing. Recording and transcript have started. So just know that. So recording and transcript. So keep that in mind.
Nice. Well, thank you, Dave, and thank you, Heather, for having us present today. You know, this is a really exciting project we got started with. I hate to say it's exciting because of COVID, because COVID's not exciting, but certainly it presented us with a challenge from one of our areas on campus that deals with mental health, and of course first thing we did was met with the customer just to figure out what was going on, and it happened to be in our counseling session department, the College of Education, and we're fortunate, to have a member of my team, Stephen Arens, who has his master's degree in clinical counseling, happens to be an IT guy. That was actually one of the things when we were going through the interview process. I said, "Oh, he's a counselor. We need counseling." So, I mean, IT people, I think we can use a little bit of help here. So he's just phenomenal. He attacked this problem. He knew the business. He knew the customers, had personal relationship with them. So it kind of checked off a lot of the boxes on getting us going and building that trust with the customer. So we sat with them. He knew, like I said, he knew the business, and so we had a list of deliverables that we worked through. And I like I always do, I reach out to our Microsoft counterparts, and to figure out, well, how are other people doing this? How are other people dealing with this? And so that, because we're all new in this work from home or work from anywhere, as we like to call it now, work from anywhere environment, we talked with the usual suspects, and they gave us some ideas, but it was really up to us to know our customers, the business, and the deliverables, so that we can kind of stitch together a solution that would meet this need. And so that's what we did. Here, I'll turn it over to Steve here in a sec, but we're going to talk through our process a little bit, what we did and what we try to accomplish, and where we're at in this process. And I like to also say that, we've met with Microsoft several times during this process to kind of feedback, and it's been a very positive experience. They're very responsive to, the customers, and listening. We met with several product groups to relay some of the issues that we were dealing with, and work with them to be able to navigate those problems. So it's been a good experience, with the team here. So Steve, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. And why don't you talk us through this project, and tell us about where we're at now.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Jason, for that. Like you mentioned, no one was planning for the year that we've had so far, right? And before, I think it's important to know what the process was before the spread of COVID-19 and the onset of the pandemic. So the groups we're going to talk about today, we've been working with, I think, 6 different clinics, but we're really going to be talking about 2 of them today, who've been the most active this summer. And those are under the College of Education. And there are 2 clinics that are set up for the training of master's and doctoral level students. These clinics are open to the public as well as to the UNT community. Normally, counseling sessions are conducted in person, not online. Normally, we can go into buildings and our whole campuses aren't closed. Like I said, things changed. When that was able to happen, sessions are recorded on site. In addition to them being recorded, though, every counseling room in both clinics had a two-way mirror and then sort of a conduit of hallways behind all of the rooms where you could go and observe. And so sessions would be observed by other counselors in training, supervisors, things like that. So you could see it live, but also sessions were recorded and stored locally. So they were stored on servers on local area networks just for those buildings, right? Clinicians would then download their content to their own personal USB device, and then they are held to HIPAA standards that sort of trickle down from whoever's supervising them. So they have to act accordingly of the guidelines set by the licensing board, but the responsibility really falls on the supervisor. Okay. The reason that they take those sessions with them is for supervision later to be viewed. You have to transcribe your sessions and then be evaluated on everything. So obviously the problem is that the clinics had to close, at least for in-person operations. What this did was left a hole for interns that were supposed to be getting experiential hours during the summertime. And so this was for, like I said, multiple programs at multiple levels of education. So we kind of had to think quickly for what's the need and what can we give to them. Because not only is there the educational need for them to get their hours, but also these clinics serve a purpose to the community as well. And I'm going to hand it back to Jason for just a little bit, but this is where the proof of concept really comes into play.
So yeah, we had a list of deliverables here. And so the first thing we wanted to do is figure out, is it feasible? And so is there a path that we can carve, using the tools that we had available to us in a short time to put this together? So we spent some time with the customer, with our clinicians, quite a bit of time right at the beginning, and they were very receptive to jumping in and trying to solve this problem because it's something that they, really impacted them and their business. And so is it feasible is the first thing we did. And we looked at it and we were able to kind of stitch together the beginnings of a program. We knew we wanted to use Teams. We knew we needed to use bookings because those were two aspects of their business that they needed. And as Stephen mentioned, the recording is another feature. We know Teams can record. We know bookings can book. So, but would it meet some of the criteria that they had set? And so that's what we started to work through. And so in our first phase of our project, we, it was very rough at first, just making the things work. And then we started to dial it in. And then, so we learned a lot about the product, the limitations of the product. And like I said, we met with, the team, the Teams product group to share some of that. They shared it with the bookings product group, some of our findings as well. And we're able to get to a point now where things became usable. So we entered actually the second phase a few weeks ago. And this is where we have in this POC, we have two of our clinics actually using the solution that Stephen will describe here in a minute in real clinical settings with real people. So our goal here is to, try to coax out any other, workflows or any other issues that they may have. And then after that, we're looking to the fall. The fall semester for us begins at the end of August. Is this deployable? Can we scale this out to our enterprise? So, we're UNT System. You see the little system logo down there. We're provide shared services to 3 different universities. So we have a Denton, Dallas, and Fort Worth university. Our University of Fort Worth is a medical school, so there's a lot of application there possibly. We have a school in Dallas, and we have a law school. And then we have in Denton, which is our flagship campus, which you'll, with the football team and all that, we have like 38,000 or 40,000 students there. So we want to be able to deploy this to the whole enterprise as a solution. So that's what we're looking at next. And so, Stephen, why don't you talk a little bit about, how we're working our way through some of these requirements there?
Sorry. Well, sure. So the two biggest right off the bat are going to be HIPAA and FERPA compliance. Luckily, we've got the business agreements where Jason mentioned at the beginning that we collaborated a lot with Microsoft, really to double check, like we're sure you can absolutely assure us, and everything, every need for really the security and the HIPAA and the FERPA specifically, that compliance, we got checked off on. But this also had to be able to perform well. Had to be reliable. We also had to be able to teach them how to use this, because we're not talking about just Teams or just Stream, but really this whole solution with the 4 big applications. We also needed to ensure that there was control over the content. And that kind of gets back to HIPAA and FERPA. We have to protect these identities. And there's I can't imagine much data that's much more sensitive than an intimate counseling session, right? That's like what we want to protect, right? But switching gears here, another thing that was important was the ability to view and to join sessions that are already in progress. I mentioned what the process was in the actual clinic, and that was being able to see those sessions happening at any time, being able to jump in if need be. And so we needed to be able to duplicate that as best we could with an online experience. And we were able to do that. So using Teams, I think that's like the most obvious thing. So they're collaborating, they're chatting, they're recording video and holding the sessions, right? We use bookings. The thing that we really liked about bookings was that in addition to all of the clever sharing of calendar resources, being able to send out invitations to clients who really shouldn't have the contact information of their clinician. So being able to send out as that bookings calendar while hiding the email address just out of the box without us having to create mail flow rules or do anything tricky with it. To be able to protect that email address was something we really liked. It's also a good place to store client contact information that everybody in the group has access to in case something happens to one of the student clinicians and they have to contact a client. Stream, obviously, it's where the videos go. And being able to have control over where that video goes was imperative. SharePoint Online we're using for file sharing, but also for documentation. Being that this is a proof of concept, it has been a constant job to keep the documentation up to date as things change. We've been meeting with these groups twice per week to iron out any issues that they have and then update accordingly. So SharePoint has really been it's really an old school, non-clever way to use SharePoint. It's kind of what it was originally for, but just for sharing this documentation, it's been a really good solution. And then we're actually a trio today. We haven't heard from her yet, but Sonia Frost is going to tell us more about Flow and Power Automate and how we have a couple of different means for the clients and clinicians to share paperwork back and forth. And we'll get to that later in the presentation. Because there were so many products and we needed this to be easy to use, Teams not only became the hub for communication, but also for where all of these things live. And we've seen office hours in the last 6 months that people demoing very similar things. And so I don't think there's anything really new here, but this is just a quick screenshot of how we organize these things. And then this is just a preview of that SharePoint site that we have where we tried to make it. It was designed so that going into a session, if you had a question about something, you could very quickly figure out where that information lives. And then just a little more detailed demo. This is kind of what it looks like in action. This was a demo group that I created, once again, in the interest of HIPAA and FERPA. I don't want to show you any sensitive data. So you'll see in this chat, it's just a lot of the administrator added this, and it's not real content, but this is the same process that we use to create the clinic teams groups. In that files, there was Dropbox. That's gonna mean more when Sonia talks about the Power Automate process. Sorry about that. Sorry, I have a very sensitive scroll wheel that wanted to advance a bunch of slides. So the how-to, like I said, we wanted that SharePoint site to be immediately available. And this is just a quick little preview of what it looks like to them, but this was if they needed to add a clinician. We tried to do huge red arrows, make it very easy to do things quickly. Bookings we wanted in here. So the way that we linked this, we had to use the full admin URL to make sure that they get to the right bookings. Because if you've dealt with multiple business bookings, you know it can get a little blurry. But we're using bookings just as it is out of the box. It lent itself really well to having the different types of counseling services, so that works great for us. We also have a direct link to the personal stream content for the user. So whoever's authenticated in Teams, that user's videos are in my videos. And then this telecounseling videos is the private channel that's only shared with the members of this team. And so right here, we're seeing the process of, I've got a remote individual counseling session, and right now I'm going to share it just with that channel. We're not going to give them owner rights, just display rights. And now the supervisors or other clinicians can view that video just by going to the telecounseling videos. And the process to remove the rights, as we all know, is reversed. We have MFA on our accounts, at least. Not everybody is MFA'd in our organization yet, but they will be at some point, which is another obviously added layer of protection and something we encourage, especially when using and sharing sensitive data. This paperwork OneDrive for Business, I mentioned that there were multiple ways to share paperwork with clients. And one of those things, so that they didn't have to use their own identity, was just a generic clinic paperwork account. So this is kind of what's happening in the background here. And I made the Teams logo really big to emphasize that since Teams is what the users have access to, we wanted to make sure that the most management came from within Teams to make it easy, right? And so what we see here is that the membership for Teams is managed by an Office 365 group. We know that that's automatically created when you create a Teams. And if you wait long enough, it will eventually show up in Stream as another means of managing access to content. So anybody who's a member of a particular team, they're automatically in this Office 365 group that's available in Stream, and we create a private channel that only that group has access to. That's what we shared to in the demo. We have 2 Active Directory groups that are also used for a couple of things. So we have it scripted out so that the membership of the particular clinic teams, anybody who's in that team is automatically added to this security group, and that syncs to Azure. And then that group in Azure, we're using group-based licensing to make sure that they have an A5. Now, there's documentation that says you don't need an A5 to use bookings, and you only need it to create the business. We have found in practice that's not the whole story. So these clinicians not only need bookings to access their calendar, but they need access to the administrative features. They need to be able to schedule each other, select the right service, enter their client info. And we have found that in our tenant, we couldn't make any of those changes without an A5. So to mitigate any issues with that, we have an automated process to add members of this team to this group, sync to Azure, they get the A5. The other Active Directory group has to do with that paperwork account that I mentioned. And this is so that nobody has to think about who has rights to what. So those members are automatically added to the AD group. They get FAP and SAP to the clinic mailbox. And then they also get site administrator privileges over the OneDrive for Business to be able to share content out of, or in a pinch, if they needed, if something happened with bookings and they needed to manually email the join information, they could use that clinic mailbox too.
Hey, Steve.
Yes.
Quick question. I believe
Yeah.
that Elena had a question. Elena,
Sure.
do you want to call him off mute real quick?
Yes, my question is, do the AD groups are on-prem or on Azure?
Both. So we have a hybrid environment, and so these start on-prem and then they are synced to Azure.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Steve.
You're welcome. All right, so I invite Sonia Frost. She's also a member of our team who created a very interesting and very useful method for sending paperwork back and forth. So take it away, Sonia.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sonia. I'm the newest member of the team. And so basically, we had the objective we had in mind when creating this entire solution was we wanted to create some kind of system so that approved users who are not necessarily in our tenant can send documents and share them with our on-campus users, our counselors. Basically, the idea is that external users will email documents from an email address that we know about, and they'll send that to a service account. And Power Automate under that service account will then activate a flow to check against the list of known users and upload the document to a folder within a document library on SharePoint. And so I'm just going to go over this diagram really quickly. The first step in the procedure is that the external just sends an attachment, and when that attachment arrives in the service account inbox, that immediately triggers the Power Automate flow, which will then check that user's email address against a known list of recipients. As soon as it finds their information, who the document, who needs access to that document, and their name and so on, we will then take that information and save the attachments in that email to a document library within SharePoint. And another part of that step is that it will delegate access to whoever needs it. Once that's done, it has the next step is to send emails. It will send 2 emails. One of them is just the sharing email to the internal user, the counselor, saying, hey, someone shared a document with you. And then the other email is a confirmation email, which goes back to the external user. And if for some reason there's some sort of error in saving the attachment or delegating the access, those get sent back to the user saying, hey, these particular files were not shared successfully. And so basically, that's just an overview of the entire procedure right there. Anyway, I'll go ahead and give it back to Stephen.
Sorry, I said thank you, Sonia, and I was on mute. So there's a lot that's working well, a lot that they're liking, and adoption is happening, which is great. The easy things that they like are Teams has made it really easy for them, especially with everyone working from home, to do planned meetings or impromptu meetings. They're just now catching on to what all of us in this meeting probably caught on to years ago about how easy it can be to share documents and collaborate, and all of this from what was first Skype and now Teams. With Stream, so okay, Stream leaves a lot to be desired, and we'll get to like our wish list next, but the Stream process of sharing these videos and storing them there is actually probably more secure than what they were doing before. And even though we don't have extensive audit logs like we would like, we can at least see when something was shared. We can give them more info than the students could give previously if they merely lost a USB drive. And when that kind of thing would happen, the state would have to be notified. And I never knew of anybody during my time in the program getting slapped on the wrist. However, it doesn't look good. It's not a good thing to lose that kind of data. So with Stream, it's a little scary whenever you're dealing with video and the internet. But in a lot of ways, it's more secure than what we had before. So room for improvement. Bookings, right off the bat, recurring meetings are something that happens with counseling most of the time. And with that not being available in bookings, they're working around it right now. But that's a feature we hope to see soon. The lack of like a ready API for us to glean data to sort of automate some of these processes, like the customer information, adding administrators, etc. It would be nice to see more than just the get mailbox stuff. If you've ever managed multiple or been an administrator for multiple bookings, you may have seen it's a little tricky to navigate between them without the full URL of the admin page, right? And so it's worked really well just straight using Teams and hard linking to those admin pages. It's worked fine, but we were forced into that because navigating between them wasn't really possible. There's also the concept of seats. When you have a service that allows for more than one person, okay, you have to add the client and then you have to additionally click add again. And you know, when we're combing through stuff to make documentation, it seems really easy and shouldn't be something you'd miss. But in practice, oftentimes the clinicians are missing that second step of adding a user to fill the seat. And what happens is it shows up on the clinician's calendar, but no invitation gets sent out to the client. And so we've had to update documentation and really drill home that you have to add them to the seat. So anyway, a bigger add button maybe would be great. And with Teams and Stream, when the clients are external to our tenant, it's great. They open their email, they click on the link, it opens in the browser, and they're fine. They're good to go. When we have tenant users, so sometimes students who are in our tenant are also clients. And when that happens, we're seeing things like the persistence of chat. So they can go back to a previous session if they want to. And if the counselor hasn't already taken the steps to make sure that they can't see the video, they could go back and watch the session if they want to. On one hand, it's like, well, that was their session, but on the other, it's not good practice and it's not recommended. Just clinically speaking, you don't want your clients to have access to that. So to be able to have a little more access control over people who've been attendees of those meetings would be great. And in addition to that, there's if a client lingers in a session long enough after it's done, like if the counselor didn't say end session, they'll get a notification that the video is ready in Stream. And if the counselor hasn't yet changed the permissions, once again, they'll have access to view it. And I already mentioned the chats. And so in general, we want to preserve the anonymity of the clinician in one sense, but also the client. And we want those sessions to really exist in the moment and then be gone as far as the client view is concerned. And when it comes to the anonymity of the clinician, maybe a little more leverage over what the clinician's information looks like once they're in that session.
All right. No, that was great, Steve and Jason. Really appreciate it. I know, you know, this is still a work in progress, but I really like the way, you know, you've pulled this together. And I know this was kind of just a conversation back in the March timeframe. I'm pretty sure, wasn't it? You started talking about it February, March, and then all of a sudden we needed to do it. And then other people have been raising their hands across campus. So well done. Any quick questions? We'll take a minute or two. If anybody else has some questions, I think there's personally a lot of application, right? Besides just clinical pieces, there's also some interesting uses around guidance counseling and, you know, a lot of that other teacher interaction. Even I wonder if, you know, like professor office hours or something, even, in terms of maybe not the video, but and recording it, but certainly from bookings and kind of managing their calendar a little bit. So any questions? We'll take some questions from the audience if there's any. But
I don't have a question, but I really want to say I actually really appreciated you calling out what's not working, like the improvements. Because honestly, the way that Microsoft works is that they make changes based on things that are just not doing what they're supposed to be doing or could be better. And so I hope you don't mind. I did take a screenshot of what's not working so we can share that, because I think that those things are valuable. And when you're talking about HIPAA and FERPA and all these things and you're worried, there's so many things to worry about there. And so I think that passing along, we had somebody we talked to with bookings just recently, and then, there's always really high quality feedback that we can give those product groups for them to make improvements. So I appreciated that you put that in there, because then that's a good call out for anybody trying to learn from what you're doing too, so that they're aware going into it, hey, there are still some holes that might exist, but like, here's all the great setup. Think about these things as well,
Awesome. So Heather, we think alike. I took a screen clipping. It's already in our own Teams channel. I was laughing when I sent that. So again, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. There was some feedback that it looked like that we had from, I think it was Jose Segura, around using maybe some of the Graph API data. And maybe you could take a look at that in terms of who's accessing what and when and how long. I know Jose loves that, but I love this. So if they have questions, maybe Steve or Jason, if you want to put your email in the community channel, I'll leave that up to your discretion. And wonderful. Really appreciate it. Next week, we're going to talk about cloud app security. So thank you again, Jason and Steve. Really appreciate everybody joining today.
That was really fantastic. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Bye, guys. And team.
and team. Miss you already, Heather.
All right. See you next week.
Bye.
So hey, Dave, we got a cloud app security guy too.
Oh, hold on one sec. Let me stop this recording. All of a sudden, one of us will say something that will. They changed my interface again. Oh, goodness gracious. Stop recording and transcription.